Okay, in this tutorial we will talk about zoom in Mugen 1.1, and I will use this moon drive activation states for this demo. And inside the original game, actually the camera zooming a little bit, but it's not that noticeable. But whatever, I will use this to do a demo for you. So for zoom, it's a Mugen 1.1 only feature, and it's an undocumented feature. So basically, it's not that common for Mugen Author to use zoom. So in order to use zoom, so you create another state controller. For example, this one, zoom. Type is zoom. So this is an undocumented one, so you cannot find it under the official document. And let's say the trigger is 1, so there will be no transition. So we are trying to do a simple zoom for this demo. And we will say scale is the value to zoom in, and the ports is where you want to zoom in. So the scale I will say 1.0, and the ports I will say 00, which is the center of the stage. Now I activate the moon drive and see what happens. And you see nothing happens. So here the scale for 1 means nothing is zoomed in, nothing is zoomed out. If the scale is less than 1, so it will be zoomed out. If the scale is bigger than 1, so it's zoomed in. So you see there's still nothing happening. I look at the error message, you will see the zoom scale must be greater than 1 or equal to 1. So you now know the character zoom have a limitation that can only zoom in, but the stage zoom also have a limitation that can only zoom out. So after change, let's see what happens. Yeah, it works. You see, if I jump far away, then the camera can no longer focus on the character, because the zoom in point is the center of the screen. Now it's time for us to change this pause parameter. So I will say pause X is player's pause X, and pause Y is player's pause Y. And let's check again. Whoa, it worked. Okay, thanks for watching, and this will be the end of this tutorial. Just kidding. You see, there's a problem. When you want to dig in the zoom, for example, you really want to zoom in a lot. Let's say 4. You see, you can't lock on or zoom in onto the character either. Even you say the XY coordinate is the player's XY coordinate. I change to 3 and try again. You see, it still can't lock on to the character. So it's only possible when you are zooming a little bit, but not too much. But this little bit zoom cannot achieve this kind of effect. For example, my Ryu, when he is doing Shin Shoryuken, you see the zoom is really zoomed in, and where is he on the stage. But on the other side, our Saber cannot zoom properly. Now this is the real start of this tutorial to tell you how to zoom properly. So by using this simple zoom controller, actually you have no way you can achieve this proper zoom. So if you studied my character before, you will saw, for example, my Miyuki. You will see this kind of helper to acting like a camera. So this camera will pan left to right and zoom in and out and acting like a camera. So I can control where this helper to focus on where I want to zoom in. So for this example, I will not write from start to beginning. I will just copy the code from my Miyuki into the Saber, and I will do some modification for the code. So I copy the whole zoom code and change the state number by +1, and I copy it back to our Saber's common helper file. So I will paste in and change the name. So I will say this is multi-blood type Lumina super zoom helper. So it's in air and have no physical property and using a empty animation. And because we doesn't care the animation, so the sprite property, the priority we also don't care. But for demo purpose, I will use this animation where is a camera icon. So I will display this camera icon instead of a empty animation. And the below one is all the variable I used in this zoom helper or camera helper. And for this var40, actually I use this var40 as a target ID. For example, if I want to target my parent, then the var40 is my parent. If I want to target and zoom in into the enemy or any other player, I just give the player ID. And if the player ID cannot be seen or detected, so this zoom helper will try to kill itself. So next thing is the screen bound. So the screen bound says I'm always running this trigger, and the value is 0. That means I am not bound to this screen. Basically, I can move out of the screen, but the camera will still pan with the helper. So this part will enable the absolute zoom, but I will not deal with it yet, so I comment this thing out. So there's two concepts of zoom in Mugen 1.1. One is the character zoom we are currently doing. Another is the stage zoom. For example, this stage. The stage zoom actually is 0.75. So it's not 1. So our character will not be too big. But if our character say let's zoom to 1, so actually nothing happens. The character need to say I zoom 1.1, then it will zoom in a little bit. So the character zoom is relative to the stage zoom. And the previous code I comment out is can do the compensation. Basically, I can compensate the stage zoom into 1, then zoom to my character's value. So for my camera helper, it has 3 phases. So the phase 1 is you zoom in to the character. Phase 2 you stay there. Phase 3 you zoom out and return to original position for the camera. So I use var5 to control phases. So for example, when var5 is 0, it's zoom in, and var5 is 1, it's staying there. If var5 is 3 or -1, it will zoom out. For here, I'm changing for the unexpected condition. For example, my character got hit or damaged or something happens. It's not doing what it's not supposed to do. So the zoom camera have to react to our parent. So if the parent is doing something wrong, the zoom camera need to zoom out and kill itself. So here is we are saying if our parent is not doing moon drive, is not doing super, is not doing any other super or got hits. For example, my parent is move type is got hurt, then we will set var5 to -1 to tell the zoom helper you're supposed to zoom out and kill yourself. So before we process with the code, there's something I need to let you know. So for Mugen, there is a hidden camera. So the camera always in the middle of the screen is here. So the camera will move left and right and up and down. It's always in the center of the screen, not center of the stage. So we want this camera in the center of the screen to move towards to our player. So this will be the phase 1. And phase 2 is stay there, and phase 3 is come back to the center of the screen. If we back to the code, actually the phase 1 is var5 is 0, and it's from the start it's already 0. So we enter the phase 1 without any coding, but we need to say when we want to stop phase 1. So here we say when var6, which is a counter, is greater than 20, then it will set var5 to 1. So basically after 20 tick we will going to phase 2, and this phase 2 is just stay and fix the camera on the character. And here you can ignore because this is for Dengeki Bunku only. Basically when they're doing super, they can use a trump card to power up. This is zooming another level, so here we can ignore and we can delete this part. So the last part is going back, which is var5 equals to 3 or -1. -1 means unexpected and var3 means expected. So here when the var5 is in 1 or 2 and parent is set off this flag, so we will signal, we will receiving the signal from our parent, which is Saber, to say, hey, I'm finished my animation, please zoom out. So we will zoom out by receiving the signal of our parent. Then set var5 equals to 3. So here will be the movement part of our camera. So in the very beginning, which time is 0, so we will set our camera to X position 0. So for X position 0 means center of the screen, always at center of the screen. Even our character is all on the left or right, is still at the center of the screen. But the Y position I say is camera Y. So the camera Y means the camera may go upward because we jumped. So the amount of the camera moving upward is the camera Y. So we want focus on the camera's position. So which is X position is pos X and the Y position is camera Y. But where is the camera X? So the camera X is the camera, now you see it's center of the screen, but towards the distance between center of the screen and the center of the stage. So it's this distance is the camera X. And here we will see the first part for moving the camera. So when var5 is 0 and var6 is 0 means the first tick of the stage, and we will set a XY velocity or XY speed to move this camera towards the player. And here may be too complicated, I will use a simpler way to write this. So I will say just parent distance x divide by the time for phase 1. So for the time we see, we give it 20 ticks. So the game is 60 FPS. That means every second there's a 60 ticks. So we'll give 20 ticks for the camera to go from the center of the screen or towards the player. So here we can see we only want to travel, for example, 50% of the distance. We say this distance multiplied by 0.5 is saying we only want to travel half of the distance towards the player. And the same thing can go the y coordinates. So the distance we want to travel divided by 20 ticks is our velocity. So the next part is stop, means we will focus on the point we want to zoom in. So because this helper have no physical properties, so it doesn't have any friction, so we need to stop to set the XY velocity to 0. And the last part is like the first part, is to fly back to the origin points. So here we are saying pos x, and the pos x basically is the current helper's position towards center of the screen. So we will just use the distance and flip the sign and divide by the time we want to travel to original place, then we will get the velocity. For the y speed, here I say the helper pos y is not accurate. Actually, the helper pos y can be quite high, but you want to return to the original position, which is quite bottom of the screen. So the real one should be the camera pos y. So I will use the player pos y minus camera pos y. So this will give our the distance we need to travel back for y-axis. So for the time, we are using a 10 ticks. So divide by 10 is the velocity. So here is another var set for floating var 22, and here is it's saying to deal with error or unexpected situation. But here we are not using this part anymore, so I will ignore and delete this part. And here is the zoom in part, the real zoom in part. I will use fvar22 for the zoom in factor. So I will say during the first 0 to 19 ticks, I will zoom in, and this 1 is the base 1. Remember, if I say 1 and nothing happens, it must be 1 plus something, 1.7 or 1.1, something like that. And then you saw the fvar21 is the compensate for achieving absolute zoom. So here I will rewrite this part to make it easy to understand. So I say 0 to 20, so here I don't need to add 1 anymore. So let me explain these parts in detail. So the 1 plus var 6, as we know, is the 1 is the base value, which is 1 is nothing happened. You have to be greater than 1. And this var 6 will multiply the things in these parentheses. So what is inside this parentheses? So we saw this compensate plus 0.1. Actually, the 0.1 is the amount we want to zoom in. So let's ignore the compensate, which is fvar21. And let's say fvar21 is 0, so it will be 0.1 divided by 20. So the 20 means 20 frames or 20 ticks. So we will zoom in inside this 20 ticks. So basically we will calculate every step, every tick the amount we will be zoomed in. So the var6 is the time, so var6 will increase tick by tick. It will increase from 0 to 20. So lastly, it will reaching our final point, which is 0.1. So for example, for the first tick, var6 is 0, and a 0 multiplied by anything is 0. For the first tick, var6 is 1, and multiplied by the first step, which is 0.1 divided by 20 is 0.005. So the next part is for 대기기본구, which is var5 equals 2, so we just deleted this part. The next part is a buffer or a snapshot of our current value of var22. So we store it in var23. And last part is the zoom out part. So the zoom out part is obviously we have 10 frames to zoom out. So just like zoom in, we start from 1 to a number is greater than 1. For zoom out, we start from a number which is greater than 1, then go back to 1. So how many we want to go back is the current number, which is maybe 1 point something or 2 point something, and minus 1, it will be the value we need to subtract, and this value will divide by 10, which is the 10 frame. So we will got the number for every frame we need to go back. Then this number will multiply by the time, which is var6. So we will calculate at the current frame the amount we will go back, and minus by var23. So the next part is we can finally using the zoom controller to apply this var, and we will say if time is not 0 and we have this var22, then we will apply this zoom. And for the position part, it's not as easy as it before, just saying the player X and the player Y. So the position part, you can just using my expressions here. You can just copy it, it will work, and it will zoom in at the exact points of this camera helper. Actually, I'm quite proud of by myself to discover this expression. It took me some weeks and a lot of experiment, but it's finally here. I cannot explain it why, but it works. So the next part is destroy the helper. So in following circumstances, you want to destroy this helper when the var file is -1 or 3, and the counter both reach 10, it will destroy this helper. And the following part will be the debug commands. I will ignore. So next part, I will copy my Miyuki's zoom helper code and paste it into Saber's code. So I will paste into the moon drive's activation states. So it will be here. So let's change the state number and change some activation triggers. And first, you see here, when this flag is set, then we can trigger this helper. And the time is 1, means the second tick. And the ID and the state number for here, I think we need to add 1, which is not 2, is 3. For other parts, no need to change. Maybe this number, but it doesn't matter. So for the size XY scale, we can just use the current player's size XY scale. And for here, I say size project to scale, give it a ID, and this is the player ID, is Saber's ID basically. Basically, we are telling the helper camera and says, hey, this is your parents' ID. Based on this ID, you can know what your parents is doing. If your parents is doing something unexpected, then you can kill yourself and then release the camera. And here I'm setting the flag, and this flag will determine when we are going to zoom out. So the player, which is Saber, can signal when she wants to zoom out. So in the beginning, this flag is not set. So we say time is 0, means the first tick of these states. And we will say this var19 will equals to var19 plus 256, which will set the ninth bit of this var19 to 1. And this is the flag, and here we will cancel the flag. So when the flag is set and a trigger is being met, and we will unset this flag to allow to zoom out. And here we say when the enemy element is 10, we are going to zoom out. So we are saying here is the trigger will be the current enemy, and the enemy element time is 10th, and the tick number is 0. So here will be have this flag and a minus. Okay, so this is unset the flag. It will trigger a zoom out for the zoom camera. So inside this zoom camera, we are setting var5 to 3 when this flag is unset. You see now it's working. And here I will use slow motion to let you see clearly. Now you see the camera helper is here. So it starts from the center of the screen. Not center of the screen, but for X is center of the screen, for Y is at the ground. So the camera will run towards to the player, but not full distance, maybe some 50% or 70% of distance. And here we are using 70% of the total distance. So after that, it will goes back to center of the screen. And here you may see the stage actually tear apart by the zoom, and this is why the zoom is an unofficial released or undocumented hidden system controller, because it still have some problem. And here we can try some more aggressive numbers. For example, I give it a 4 instead of 0.1. You see it can zoom to the exact points of this camera and will not be off. And you see we are not using absolute zoom, so when the character is zoomed out, the amount of zoom in will not be that much. And here you can change the amount of the distance your camera wants to travel. So here I want to make this helper more generalized, or can be used by other states, not just this moon drive. So I want to make those, for example, the time we want to zoom in, the time we want to zoom out, or how much we want to zoom in, or how much we want to travel. So we want a variable for all those parameters. So here is a trick for you. So here you can use all those parameters for size, for example, shade offset, or head ports XY, or size ground back. So you can use these kind of constant parameters for a helper to passing data or passing value into this helper. And inside this helper, I will use this kind of var set to cache the parameters I give in from the parent. For example, here I use var 11 to capture the constant size head pos x for the zoom in time, and var 12 for the zoom out time, and var 13 for how much to travel to the parents in a percentage. But here have a problem is the constant size shadow offset is an integer number, so it cannot passing as, for example, 0.5, something like that. So I will set this number by a large amount, then divide by 1000.0, so it will convert to a percentage, convert to a floating point number. Then we will run into the code and try to change all the fixed number into variables. Okay, the change is done, and now I replace all the fixed value into variables, and I will feed in those variables from these helper statements. So for example, shadow offset is 700, basically is saying we will travel 0.7, which is 70% towards the parent. Or we can change here from 0 to 1 to enable absolute zoom. And here determine how much we want to zoom in. Here is 1000, which is 1, but maybe when it's too much, we can change this value to a smaller one. And here you see I found a bug. When the camera want to travel back, instead of going down, it's going upwards. So I made a mistake. Here I should have a minus sign to flip the direction. So basically I find a bug on my Dengeki Bunku character. So because my Dengeki Bunku character doesn't have any super in the air, so I never find out this bug. So the benefits to implement this kind of variable is, so I can copy all the code and paste into another state. So here I paste into the heat blaster states. So I will just need to make some few changes, and it doesn't need to touch the camera helper itself. Then we can have a zoom in and a zoom out effects. So for these states, I want zoom out at maybe number 6 or number 8. So I just need to go back and change the trigger and change the anime to this anime, and change the anime element to number 8. And that's it. Maybe I need to tweak some of the parameters. It's up to you.
ブログではこの辺りに。
Now you have the zoom helper on another state. If you like my content, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.